Hello and welcome to the 999th edition of the Enfield Microphone, Dateline, the December the 1st, 1994. On this occasion, your readers are...
Joyce, Marjorie,
with me, Tony, and with Richard on the controls.
Good evening.
In this edition, we have the following headlines. Rich pickings for Sly Warden. A girl dies in a road horror. Hospital ward was hellhole for stroke victim. It's now over to Joyce for the first item.
Residents and Conservative councillors are up in arms over plans to develop the Saracens rugby ground in Oakwood. Local Tory ward councillor David Conway claims the second division club has struck a secret deal with Labour leaders to let it expand its ground in a park by Chase Side. Both Saracens and the council firmly deny any deal. However, Council Leisure Chairman Pat Horridge admitted Labour agreed in principle to Saracens being allowed to develop its ground. He promised no final approval would be granted unless Saracens won over local residents. All we've had is an informal meeting with the Saracens to say we would like to see them stay in the borough. We think that's good for the borough. If they want to improve their ground, we have no objection to them improving it as long as it's in conjunction with the other clubs on the site, he said. Asked if that was official council policy, he replied, "It's a formal Labour group policy." The ground has been the subject of arguments for many years. Residents are unhappy at match day disruption. Saracens has threatened to leave the borough unless allowed to build a ground worthy of its Courage League status. It is at present negotiating with the council over renewal of its lease. Councillor Conway said Councillor Horridge's statement contradicted Labour promises of a ban on development in public parks. He also claimed Saracens officials tried to charge members of the public entering the park on match days. He believed that that was illegal. I and the other people of Oakwood are fed up with Saracens' attempts to take over the park and prevent people going there. It's about time Saracens stopped behaving like a lot of public school bullies. It's a public park. It's disgraceful that people are trying to monopolise it, he said. Saracens spokesman Bill Edwards said, "What local people are calling a park is in fact a public sports ground. All we want to do is develop our part of that sports ground without impinging on any of the other sports that are played there." He denied Councillor Conway's accusations that park users were being charged. He insisted the club only charged people who watched first-team matches. He added, "We have a rough plan of how we would like to redevelop the area that we use on Saturday afternoons. It would not be to exclude the public, except on match days. We would close off no more than we do when we have a first 15 game on Saturdays." The club revealed details at a meeting with Residents' Association members and sports clubs. However, many residents were worried at the extent of the proposals.
A traffic warden has been topping up her quota by lurking near her former workplace and nabbing drivers she knows are forced to park illegally because of a lack of space. To make matters worse, the yellow lines in the area are obsolete. There are no residents nearby, and the council have agreed to remove the restrictions. Unfortunately, because the move must be passed by various committees, it looks as if the yellow lines will remain until April of next year. The road in question, Mawson Road in Ponders End, is the home of lorry firm Transfleet Services, and the manager, Chris McCabe, approached the council so his employees could park in the street as the yard is constantly in use with the coming and going of the heavy good vehicles. The restrictions were originally implemented to provide access for large vehicles. The traffic warden, who has not been named, used to work at the bus station next door and is therefore well aware of the parking habits at Transfleet, where the rules have not been rigidly enforced for years. She knows we're easy pickings, so if she hasn't got her full quota for the day, she comes here and tickets everyone, said Mr. McCabe. Our men are mostly earning £190 to £200 a week, and at the moment they're giving at least £30 a week back to the council. The council agreed restrictions should be removed at a meeting of the Roads and Traffic Subcommittee on the 15th of November. However, the matter now has to go out to public consultation, and if no objections are made, the decision to revoke the rules could be made by April. Mr. McCabe said, "I can't see why something cannot be done before then. The restrictions are pointless now." A council spokesman said, "The removal requires a traffic order and public consultation, and therefore, if no objections are received, it will be spring before the restrictions are lifted."
This is a press information release from London Transport, and it's headed Countdown to Talking Bus Stops. At the touch of a button, visually impaired passengers can hear the latest bus information at the bus stop. London Transport's countdown system, electronic signals at bus stops which show the destination and waiting time for the next bus, has been running for 3 years. In conjunction with London Transport's unit for disabled passengers, London Transport Buses is now testing a digital speech add-on which announces the same information. This should be a particular help to people with visual impairments. The trial will take place at 2 countdown stops on Route 18, that's Sudbury to Baker Street, which are regularly used by visually impaired people. That's outside Great Portland Street Station westbound, near the headquarters of the Royal National Institute for the Blind, and at the Halfpenny Steps stop on the Harrow Road eastbound. Users simply push a conspicuous black button mounted on a bright yellow background to hear the latest route information. The press release ends there, but press inquiries can be made through London Transport Press Office 0171 918 3271.
An angler found the body of a depressed young man floating in the King George IV Reservoir, Hornsey Coroner's Court heard. The young man was identified as Christopher Thomas Evans, 21, who was living at Windmill House Hostel, Windmill Hill, Enfield, following treatment for depression. GP Dr. Jane Harrison confirmed that Mr. Evans had a history of depression and frequent previous suicide attempts. He was addicted to LSD and took cannabis. Mrs. Mary McGowan of Scotland Green Road, Enfield, said she last saw her son on June the 2nd when he arrived at her home very upset and had told her that people were threatening his life because of drugs. After his visit, her husband's dothapine tablets were missing. Coroner Dr. William Dolman recorded a verdict of suicide.
Complaints that bus travel in Enfield is becoming a daily hell has led the Gazette to start a campaign on behalf of irate passengers who say the public deserve better transport. We decided to act after sampling the kind of problems that test travellers' patience to the limit. On one bus route alone, we found delays of up to 50 minutes, buses too full to take waiting passengers, and a driver who simply forgot to stop. Without reliable public transport accessible to everyone, road congestion and pollution will hit nightmare levels. This is not just the view of fringe groups. It was accepted by a recent Royal Commission which said spending should be switched from road building to buses, trains, tubes and trams. Among those pressing the government to heed that advice is the Capital Transport Campaign, which has just carried out a survey of bus services. Enfield came out relatively well among London boroughs, but the campaigners say it left a lot to be desired. And if Enfield is among the best, the worst must be very bad indeed. One part of the survey looked at high-frequency routes, where buses are supposed to run every 4 minutes. It found passengers in Enfield had a 1 in 6 chance of waiting between 10 and 30 minutes. Andy Burns of the CTC said that cuts in government grants were hitting all services except those heavily used by commuters. Most at risk were local routes serving pensioners and others who can ill afford other means of travel. He added, "The latest figures for average waiting times in London are worse than at any time since 1990. Lynn Smith of London Transport Buses replied, "It's very rare to have to wait long periods." She insisted there was only a 1.8% chance of having to wait 20 minutes or more, and a 0.2% chance of having to wait 30 minutes or more. Before receiving the survey, the Gazette was already investigating local bus services after complaints from passengers. Examples of poor services include the main route between Enfield and Barnet. The number 307 has only 2 buses an hour at some times of day. The Lee Valley Leisure Centre and UCI Cinema Complex at Pickett's Lock is served by only 1 bus route. London Transport Buses has admitted that in the 4 weeks up to the 15th of October, it failed to meet any of the service targets set for it by the government. It said staffing problems were partly to blame. Worse is to come. London Transport has announced a 25% rise in fares for short journeys in zones 3 and 4. The Gazette is determined that passengers should not have to suffer in silence. Write to the Gazette at 8 to 10 Silver Street, Enfield, with your travel complaints, or call your news desk on 367 2345. Now the news desk telephone 367 2345.
The first ever radio cassette player recorder, designed especially for blind and disabled people, was launched in London at the beginning of November by the Minister for Disabled People, William Hague. The £115 machine, that incidentally is in sterling, it's not the weight, the £115 machine produced by Clark and Smith of Wallington, Surrey, and commissioned by the British Wireless for the Blind Fund, incorporates many special features of particular benefit to people who find products on the domestic market fiddly and difficult to operate. The Prime Minister, John Major, sent a special message of support to the launch ceremony at the Intercontinental Hotel in London's Park Lane. Presenter and broadcaster Richard Baker, whose mother is blind, conducted the official proceedings, at which speakers included the Minister for Social Security and Disabled People, Mr. Hague, and Britain's first blind High Court Master, Mr. John Wall, Chairman of the British Wireless for the Blind Fund. The Prime Minister in his message said, "I am keen that blind and visually impaired people should have greater opportunity to participate in and be informed in the issues that affect the society in which we live. I am sure that the launch of this new radio cassette will be an important tool in giving people the means to access information and absorb our diverse cultural heritage." A few weeks before the official launch, Clark and Smith presented one of its new radio cassette players to actor Sir John Mills, who has become blind. In a recorded message played at the launch ceremony, Sir John said it had been his inseparable companion since it was presented to him. He goes on to say, "It is wonderfully constructed and of tremendous help to people who have problems with eyesight. An audible rising or falling tuning tone indicates the radio band position, and there is an audible cue and review system for finding selected items on a tone indexed tape. The radio has 3 wave bands, FM, medium and long wave, with 5 preset stations for each, allowing 15 stations to be stored. The sturdy and robustly built machine can be mains or battery operated. The recording mechanism on many machines on the domestic market wears out long before the radio. This new product by Clark Smith has a cassette mechanism which can be replaced separately with a minimum of fuss. The machine's main disadvantage is its price, £115 inclusive of VAT and postage, from Jane Maron or Maria Phillips at Clark and Smith Industries, Melbourne House, Melbourne Road, Wallington, Surrey, SM6 8SD. Jane Maren's name is that's spelled M for mother, A-R-R-E-N. However, for anyone registered blind over the age of 8 and in need, it is available free of charge from the British Wireless for the Blind Fund. So that's good news.